Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in bountiful Bakersfield, California, this is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and we are thrilled to have on the show. I'm so stressed out from starting late. I think I'm messing everything up, but we're thrilled to have back on the show Lama Kathy Wesley to round out 2024. We're going to be talking about how to cultivate sanity using Buddhist techniques and also just her own experience as a teacher. And if you're not familiar with Lama Kathy, she's a friend of our show, and she was a student of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche since 1977 and participated in the first 3-year retreat led by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche at Karmaling Retreat Center in upstate New York, and thus earned the title of Retreat Lama. She's currently serving as the resident teacher at the Columbus KTC, and she just gives really down-to-earth teachings that are both applicable with a sense of humor. So we love having her on the show. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody. I apologize for the late start, but the tech gods had other ideas. We're having some issues with our Zoom, but we had to get that straightened out. This is our last show for the season, 6 years, all done today. So we'll be on hiatus now for December and back in January with some new episodes, starting with Spell It Out the first Tuesday or Wednesday. We haven't decided yet, but keep an eye on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. While you're there, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. It helps us cover a bit of our costs, and hopefully we have nice new sound today. We definitely have cost because unfortunately we missed last Monday because I spilled a cup of coffee all over our audio mixer and fried it, so we had no audio. So thank you to those folks at Sweetwater for giving us or helping us to get our hands on a new Rodecaster Pro 2, amazing piece of tech. So I think our sound will be better than ever now. So blessings out of chaos, which maybe is the theme for today's show. So that's a good thing. And then our book is out, Tarot Alchemy, a Kabbalah-inspired approach for reading the cards on Amazon. And if you have trouble finding it, get a hold of us and we'll point you in the right direction. And we're really excited about that as well. So I don't want to take up too much time because we are starting late and we will extend it, so we'll still be an hour. So with that, I'm going to kick it back to both of you guys. So take it away, Krista and Lama Kathy.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And welcome to the show, Lama Kathy.
I'm delighted to be here with you in the new Sanctum Sanctorum. I must say, I feel honored to be part of this season. So thanks for inviting me.
Of course, and you know, I think I need to cultivate a little sanity right now too.
Yeah, I guess you could say this was a writ small. Chaos writ small. I love it that Michael said blessings out of chaos, because this was chaos writ small, but then we've also experienced chaos writ large. So
yes.
Yeah. So
I think it seems like you're going to have to learn how to operate both in this particular world right now. It's become, well, I think since the pandemic, honestly, it's still been a very divisive country. So in some ways it's not completely new, the division, but I think that there is this element of fear for certain groups that is very real. And we'll talk about that too in the show, but let's go ahead and get started with the topic. So what would you like to sort of lead with the idea of how to cultivate sanity from your point of view and your experience?
Yeah, and I'm hoping that a lot of folks who are listening today have some experience of mindfulness. Because that's really, for me, that's the place to begin. Just some kind of mindfulness. I was reading, over the weekend, I was reading a Buddhist text written in the 8th century.
Wow.
By a great Indian Buddhist master. Thank heaven all these have been translated into English, so I didn't have to learn Sanskrit, And so I was reading this 8th century text. And there's a chapter called Vigilance, and it sounds like really like scary and boring and maybe, nothing to do with sanity. But really what it's about is about the two qualities they said a person needed were self-possession and determination.
Oh,
Self-possession and determination. and that was the method. Those were the two methods that people could use to stay sane in a crazy world. And in fact, the text even mentioned, being in a wild society with a lot of evil people, and how could you survive, and so forth. And part of it is to cultivate and develop this self-possession, meaning that self-possession means to me, I'm not talking about supernatural possession here. I'm talking about being able to guide oneself. Of course, Krista, you're totally familiar with our teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, who passed away a number of years ago. Great Dharma masters have come in and out of our lives, and great teachers of all spiritual traditions come in and out of our lives, but some make a lasting impression. One of the things he said to me was that there was an old saying in Tibet, which was a herding society. It was an agrarian society. They were very much like the Plains Indians in North America, in that they wandered from place to place following the pastures. And they basically said, if you want to have a happy life, you have to hold your own tether.
Oh. And
yeah, you have to hold your own tether. Yes. Because the animals would be staked on tethers, right? And in order that they not wander. And the idea was that if you handed somebody else your tether, they could lead you around. You see, and in fact, it was the actual term is nose rope. Instead of tether, they said nose rope, which is an ox, right, with the nose ring, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea, what he was trying to say that self-possession was, he wasn't explaining it in the context of this, but he said saying was about how to keep your own seat, hold your own seat while people around you are losing their minds. Don't hand your tether to somebody else and let them lead you around. And the other thing that I found interesting was determination. Self-possession is the ability to be one's own boss. And determination, to me, is like wanting, I think, wanting to not be moved. Like, I am going to stay here and be me regardless of what anybody says. So this idea of determination that, as the old rock and roll song, we won't get fooled again,
But we were.
I know, but there you go. It's human society. We live in a society that values what the majority says. And so we'd have a small majority in this country that have said, hey, we want to try our way. You had your way. Now we'll try our way. But as you say, there are groups that are feeling fear right now. And I don't want to gloss over. Their fear is real. Yes. And their concern is anchored in reality because of what they've been told. They've been told that they're not wanted. Yes. They've been told that they'll be targeted. They've been told this ahead of time, partially, I think, so that there can be some control over them.
Yeah, absolutely. They're giving away their tether.
Yeah, well, I understand it. I completely understand it.
Yeah.
Why people would do that. I understand that. But one more thing to say about this self-possession, and that is, and the tether and holding one's own, and that we can get our own back. We can get our own tether back. Okay, by practicing some form of introspection, whatever kind of introspection works for you. Maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's dance, maybe it's art. I mean, the idea is introspection, bringing you back to yourself, not being drawn outward. Okay, not being drawn outward and where we could possibly fall under the influence of people who want to grab our tether and lead us around, Yeah. One of my friends, and I'm going to name check him here because he's just so cool, Lama Tsultrim Yeshe, a Wisconsin Norwegian bachelor farmer, that's how he describes himself, who became a Buddhist monk and then did the 3-year retreat. I mean, he became a monk while he was in retreat and remained a monk, and he remains in Wisconsin. And not long after the sort of high point in division occurred on election day, he posted just a simple saying: if someone controls your emotions, they control you.
Yes.
If someone can control your emotions, they can control you. And so we've all been there. We've all seen something that has outraged us. We've seen an injustice that we just can't bear to look at, or we've been ourselves subjected to injustice and we can't stand it and we have to cry out. I understand all of those things. I'm just trying to get people into a place where they can make the best decisions possible when they feel these things, right? Because we're so drawn outward in our lives. You know, human beings, we love stimulation. We're into stimulation, like more. Look at all my books. I bought these because I craved what was in them.
Yes.
I mean, we're human beings. We crave stimulation. We want to be challenged. We want to understand, but then we don't know when to quit. And then social media comes along and gives us a new way to connect. And it sounds so wonderful and it's very entertaining and we really love it. And then it becomes our master and starts to take over. And, you know, and then we lose our tether.
Yeah.
We've handed it to someone else. And so what introspection does is it takes that back. It takes that attention that has been so atomized, you know, and then brings it back to us so that we can recognize that inside this swirling mass of chaos and confusion in the world around us, we are still here and can have an impact. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then listening to you, I was thinking that one of the ways that helps me have a compass is by having, I would call ethics. And I think that is probably not talked as much about in Tibetan Buddhism by maybe the popular. It's always meditation. But that's usually a part of it, is not morality, but having these ethics that you can kind of come back to with that self-possession. Like, is this part of my ethical value? Do I want to participate? And it seems like that's something people could lean on a little bit.
Very true. Very, very true. There's two places that the ethics derive from. There is the Buddha himself, when he was alive 2,500 years ago in India, he taught for 45 years, mainly in a question and answer format. About 100 years after his death, the mainly oral tradition of what he said was written down. In one of the first collections of his sayings, and I've quoted this on the program before, he said, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make our world. We make the world that we live in." And then he gave his very simple teaching, the simplest possible teaching on karma, by saying, if we think, speak, and act with an impure mind, suffering follows us like a shadow that's like the wheeled. Let's start again. I see we're all having it today. If we think, speak, and act with an impure mind, suffering follows us like the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart. Then he repeats, we are what we think, all that we are arises with our thoughts we make the world. And then he says, if we think, speak, and act with a pure mind, happiness follows us like a shadow that's unshakable. So where's that delineating line? Where's that dotted line between the pure mind and the impure mind? The pure mind is the unselfish mind, and the impure mind is the selfish mind. And so really, in the end, that's kind of the determiner of Buddhist ethics is what we are doing to impose our will on others and to push them around. That's an impure, selfish mind, you see. But are we trying to benefit and care for others? That's a pure mind. You see what I'm saying? So that's sort of like the base of all Buddhist ethics is that.
It's a really good, simple point to make. I think it would be good also to address the complexity of the emotions that are coming up so that people don't feel, I look at some of the Facebook pages that are very maybe concerned about this from the very beginning, and just the different reactions and just to sort of see what was going on in a sense. And the idea that it's okay to initially feel whatever you need to feel. That I think sometimes people feel that purity means I'm not supposed to be sad or depressed or upset. And as you know, and as I know, that's not true. And Thich Nhat Hanh has lots of books about it, even like how you address fear and anger. You don't push it away. You don't deny it. But I do think that it could be misinterpreted when we use those terms pure and impure. And in this particular culture right now, the complexities of the reactions, I think require some sort of maybe training as well. That what would you tell someone that came to you about it? Like, well, I want to feel good about and positive, but I'm just so depressed by things. No matter what, I put all this energy and it went all awry. So if someone came to you as a Buddhist teacher, how would you help them?
Kind of where I would start would be to find out the person themselves. I would say it is natural to feel the way you feel. First off, bottom line, it is natural to feel the way you feel. Yes, you feel grief. Yes, you feel loss. Things did not go the way you wanted them to go. Because I have to tell you, Krista, I'm talking to all kinds of people. I have people who are elated because their man won. Mm-hmm. And there are other people who are depressed because the other person lost. And so I'm hearing people on both sides talk about things, and I'm watching them all get ahead of themselves. Mm. The people who are really depressed don't realize that they still have themselves, and they still have their own love, compassion, and goodness, and no one can take that away. Mm-hmm. No one can take that away. They've got their own power and strength within themselves, and nobody's going to take that away. And then the other people who are being unkind to others now, taking the opportunity now that they've won to do a little bit of dancing and mocking people who lost. And I'm trying to tell them, relax a little bit, be kind, because that's, you have to remember that we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make the world. So if they're dancing in delight that they won, and they're saying bad things to hurt other people, they're not doing their karma any favors. And if a person is feeling super depressed, it's understandable. And we also have to go and help them get inside that and be a good friend to themselves and care for themselves and put something else inside this situation, because we have all these inputs. So I've known some people who have basically chosen to take a break from all the harmful speech that they're seeing around them, right? And to give themselves a break. And I talked to a gentleman today, as a matter of fact, who said he's given himself a break from all social media because he just needs to be away. And he said, and I already feel better. He said, now I feel like slowly, as I practice my meditation and become more centered in myself, I can then slowly return to this world and see that maybe I can be of an impact in that I can be there for other people who are still depressed and still sad. Right. Once we work through our own grief, or at least start working through our own grief, then we can be present for other people. I read an incredible, absolutely incredible posting on social media, which a lot of people say is a vast wasteland. But this wonderful post from a school teacher on the East Coast came through, and it said, I have students coming to me saying, my family will be deported. I have students coming to me saying, I have friends who are trans. What am I going to do? Because they're going to be persecuted. Am I going to be persecuted?
Mm-hmm.
And so forth and so on. And so she said, you know what? She said, I said to each one of them, I gave them hugs. She said, I let them know I was still there for them. I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to be one of the adults they can lean on and they can be present with and they can be genuine with. And I think that's, and then she asked the student, now, do you remember the motto of the classroom? And the student said, yes, we take care of each other.
That's wonderful.
We take care of each other. That's the motto of the classroom. And so if I can help a person who comes to me sad, say, I understand why you're sad. You can be sad as long as you need to be, but do take some time away from the noise. Find a place where you can center yourself, inside yourself. Do some introspection practice. Get out in nature. Do things that relieve the burden from your shoulders. Breathe. And then after that, begin to recreate yourself in a way that will be nourishing for you and for the people who you're going to need to be present with. Because we're all going to need to be present with each other.
I love that community idea. And that does seem to be, we've talked about it in the past shows, that there's been a loss of community in some ways with people not going to church. And this is an opportunity to create in some way, whether it's through your school, through even online programs. Some people seem to like that. And then the church that we go to on Sundays, the Unitarian Universalist, I still have trouble with the name. They have started a monthly support group for people that might need it, that they can just call whatever's going on with them. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. We can do things like that and welcome everyone. Though I did have a question for you personally about the people that are elated that he won. And you're probably more evolved than I am. But that I have a couple clients that I didn't even know had voted for Trump, and they were bragging about it too online. And I still read for them, but someone had said to me that, how could you do that? And I couldn't do that. I couldn't be objective. And I said, well, I can be, but I understand that viewpoint. I understand that it's such an extreme election with this particular president-elect that it's created this really even deeper division with people, unfriending people because they feel unsafe. There's a reality to it. They've already shown that, right after the election, people are getting hate voicemails, and it's going to happen because it's permitted now. It's encouraged to be like this. And so, how do you handle something like if you're like in a social service position and that let's say I was one of the groups. What if I was or I had undocumented family? Like, how do you handle that in a way that's compassionate to yourself as well as others, not leaving yourself out?
Mm-hmm. I think I understand the question, but let me make sure I understand it to be sure. So what you're what you're asking is, if a person who is in one of the groups that are considered on the fringe, who might be harmed by the incoming administration, if that kind of person would come to me, what would I advise them? Is that what you're asking?
Well, no, it wasn't clear. I'm asking like someone like even you in your position and my position, where I am supposed to be neutral because of the readings I do. And one of my clients was saying, well, how can you read for someone like that, knowing, who they are? And I got what she was saying. And maybe someone else, like maybe in a position, not so much like a doctor who's supposed to treat everybody by law, but is it all right for someone just to politely say, no, I don't want to?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for clarifying. Cause, I sometimes I miss meanings and stuff.
No, I think I wasn't clear.
It's okay. It's okay. I was I was a newspaper reporter before I got this job. And so sometimes I can follow and sometimes I can't. So I always have to stop and say, hey, can we back up a little bit? Anyway, well, here's the deal. It depends on the individual. I think what it really comes down to, it depends on the individual. How many of us are self-aware? And I mean are truly self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
And how many of us are practice self-honesty and can truly practice self-honesty? I'm just very fortunate that I would not turn down a person who came to me. I would not. And because everybody's hurting inside. Everybody is hurting inside. The fact that these people who have voted on on Trump's side are excited and happy and now maybe exercising a little bit of their retribution or their version of sort of dancing and overcoming what they saw as their oppressors, because you have to remember that's how it was seen.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how it was described for them, was that they're overcoming their oppressors. So of course they're going to be jubilant. But so kind of my take thus far has been to remain technically neutral, but to encourage them to find, to be self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
and to encourage them to recognize that everything they think, do, and say creates the karmic container that they live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they're busy mocking and hurting other people, it's just not going to work long term.
Right.
They're not going to be, it'll be bad if they're in business. It'll
Sure.
be bad for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's, because we all have to find a way to be now, because interestingly enough, I think that people want to get along. And I think and as a whole, I
Mm-hmm.
think people want to get along. And the fact that, like, on my little street on which there were 20 houses, I have a little tiny street. On my neighborhood is one tiny street, 20 houses.
Mm.
Zero political signs this year.
Mm.
Zero. And I think part of the reason for that is that everybody wants to calm down.
That's a good point,
Everybody.
actually. We had the same
Yeah.
thing. There was no signs around here at all. Though we're new here, but there was and we live in a Republican area, and there was very little Trump signs, very little.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
were really
Same here.
surprised.
Same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I live in the Republican area as well. And so it's okay, because see, this is where I think we may be, we might be surprised, because the sort of the negative jolt that people get from exercising their worst impulses,
Mm-hmm.
which is what's being encouraged, is, if you're mad at somebody, like, abuse them, hurt them, push them, step on them. People are being encouraged to do this.
Right.
And lots of people will do it for lots of reasons, mainly because they were stepped on and hurt as kids.
Sure.
And that they feel stepped on and hurt by the way that the society is. They're projecting outward their view of the world, which is a zero-sum game. If you win, then I have to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so because people believe this zero-sum game, for the people who are on the losing side, they feel horrible. And for the people on the winning side, they're jubilant. And so what we have to realize is that both of these extremes are not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
They're not fully accurate, because these are how people define themselves. And according to the teachings of Buddhism, we create the world that we live in ourselves. Nobody else creates that for us,
Mm-hmm.
which is how these Tibetans who survived communist occupation and repression are really interesting to me. Because Garchen Rinpoche, he's an amazing teacher. He's still living. He was put in prison by the communist government after after many, many religious Tibetans left. There was a failed uprising against the communist government in 1959. And then through the 60s, something called the Cultural Revolution swept China and then into Tibet, where people were encouraged to destroy their oppressors by destroying monasteries and temples, and they were encouraged to bomb them and destroy them. The Tibetans themselves were made to do this. And some of the ones who didn't want to participate in that got put in prison, or maybe because they were high-ranking members of a monastery, they were put in prison. In any case, Garchen Rinpoche was in prison for, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, I don't know, a long time. And he said what kept him sane was the teachings of the Buddha and the 37 actions of a bodhisattva text itself, which was written in the 12th century by a Tibetan monastic. Shanti Deva wrote the advice that I quoted at not at the beginning. Oh no, I didn't get to the 8th century text yet. Darn. Anyway, I'll get to the 8th century text at some point. And in any case, he took this 12th century text to heart, and he did his best to be free in his own mind. He said they could put my body in jail. He said, but they couldn't put my mind in jail. And so for him, in sending out love and compassion toward the people who were causing his trouble was the way he gained mastery over himself. He, you see the idea, if you see the person who is against you as a suffering person, just like yourself, it changes how you feel about them. And by changing how you feel about them, you will not change them at all. But what you will change is what is them in you.
Sure.
In recovery tradition, they always say, you spot it, you got it. Like if you see bad behavior in another person and you point it out, as my dad, a great follower of the 12-step tradition once said, you're pointing 4 fingers back at yourself. 1 at them and 4 back at yourself, because you recognize that you have that same possibility, that same potential for badness.
Sure.
That you're putting out in the other person. So it's like, we have to see that they are no different from us. They want to be happy, and this is how they think they can do it. And we have to have compassion for that, but that doesn't mean that we don't say something is wrong when it's wrong. But how we do that, this is a difficult situation. My teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, just basically said, raging at someone, it's not going to solve anything. I'm going to see if I can find the quotation. He said, rage will not bring wrongdoers to justice. Fascinating.
No, but I will say the anger of rage, the energy, if you take it and do something instead of raging and see it as just pure energy. I'm impressed, for instance, with Newsom and the ACLU. Okay. They're all planning everything already. They know how to handle him. They have everything. I guess they had lots of lawsuits. And they're already protecting people. And it made me feel really good about being in California, which I did before. But I said, they're taking action, knowing who he is and how he operated before. They're doing something to prevent him from even harming the people he's saying he's going to harm. And they're creating a state that welcomes people if you need an abortion. And I really liked that. I was like, yeah, if you can do something, you're in a position like they are legally, taking an action, because I think this is one of the areas, I think we've talked about this before, is how do you handle anger in a way that's productive? Because obviously it can be bad for your blood pressure, but you could also repress it and think you're never angry, and all of a sudden one day you just blow up, so it's another human emotion that I agree with the whole raging and temper tantrum thing. I mean, okay, it's okay if you're 2, you've got to go through that stage. That's fine. that's becoming a human being. But yeah, that doesn't seem to produce really anything good for you even. Like, it's not good for your health even. So why would you do it? But then looking at how some people say, okay, you're going to do this. This is what we're setting this up. So we're going to block you ahead of time. And that of course, like to me as a citizen here, and it makes me feel my leaders have my back.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I can completely understand those feelings because I think human beings are hardwired for justice. I've mentioned this on previous programs where I talked about there's a famous experiment done with two groups of monkeys. And they were both asked to do a task. One group of monkeys was paid with grapes, and the other group of monkeys got nothing for doing the task. And the group of monkeys who got nothing did a sit-down strike and refused to do the task because they weren't getting their grapes.
Right.
And, and so I think that humans as primates we're hardwired for justice. The problem comes when we disagree about what's just.
Yes.
Okay, so we disagree on what is just. And so we have two visions of where we are. And what's really interesting is that we can build a third vision of where we are if we can practice that self-possession and determination. Because self-possession means that instead of like poring over social media all day long, we actually take a break from it and spend just 10 minutes relaxing our mind and doing a practice where we return our attention to itself over and over again. The practice of basic meditation, where you allow you sit in a quiet posture, or you lie on the floor and you follow your breath in, follow your breath out. And then when your attention wanders, you gently bring your attention back to the breath. And you do this with gentleness over and over and over again. My friend, Dr. Julie, the brain scientist, who I would love to talk with her here sometime because she's great. I was her lab rat. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, she studied my brain, and we did a lot of brain science stuff together. Mm-hmm. And we still do public presentations on brain science and meditation. She said that the literature is saying even just 5 minutes of this kind of restfulness and returning again and again and again can give us the ability to disengage mm-hmm. from stuff without feeling like we're doing something wrong.
Right.
We can disengage from our anger. We can purposefully disengage from our anger and do another exercise, do another thing instead that will help calm us down. And then that would allow us to do something positive mm-hmm. in response to the injustice that we see. And to me, that learning the two principal practices of the Tibetan Mahayana, which are quiet sitting meditation or shamatha and compassion meditation, mm-hmm. learning those two things, that they work together to make change inside the individual. So if a person can back up even just one step from their anger and to recognize, oh, I'm angry, instead of like being so inside the story of their anger,
sure.
They're like swallowed inside the story of they're swallowed inside the story of their anger. I have been unjustly treated, and so forth. And so the Buddha, even in his first book of sayings, says you need to abandon that kind of thinking mm-hmm. in order to live in love, because he said hate never once dispelled hate. No. Only love dispels hate. So since we have to find a way to be in this situation, to be constructive, but also not to lose our self-possession and our determination. Mm. We have to find a way to calm ourselves when we feel the anger, because we're in the story of the anger, we are stuck. We're stuck yes. in the story, like, okay, but if we can step back and say, okay, I'm angry. What am I going to do now?
Right.
And see the anger as the problem and not the other person. Like anger is holding me back from getting justice in this situation. Mm-hmm. Trungpa Rinpoche once said, we make a mistake about anger. We think it makes us strong. We think it makes us smart. We think it makes us just. We think it makes us right. And he said it does none of those things. It makes us stupid. It makes us make mistakes. And it causes us to hurt ourselves and to hurt other people, which all that science is now bearing out,
Sure.
right? Cortisol, it's hurting people.
Yeah.
That's the anger hormone that's released in bouts of rage and anger. So if we can take that one step back and then engage just the simplest compassion meditation. So sit quietly, do 5 minutes of just quiet sitting, returning to the breath again and again, and then do 5 minutes of just imagining that goodness flows out of you toward all beings. They call it metta or loving kindness meditation. Just doing that. First, you send it to yourself, then you send it to people who are close to you. Then you can send it to the people who you feel are in danger. Then you send it out to the people who are causing the harm. And then you send it to all beings. Because if you leave somebody out of at least your theoretical compassion, that person, you could actually cause them harm. And then who is hurt by that?
Well, I've learned, I told you the story about Khenpo Rinpoche teaching me about neutrality, that when you're really upset, practice neutrality, which I found was absolutely brilliant. I mean, because it was something I could do, and it's worked over the years. And what I tell myself, if there's someone I really can't send love to right now, I just say, well, right now, I'm just not capable, and it's okay that I'm not capable. I'm not wishing them harm, but I just can't do it and be authentic. And that way I'm giving myself room to grow and become more, in a sense. But I find for me, I have to be real with myself, my limits, and sort of say, as a human being, I'm, like there's certain like friendships in my mind, I'll go, you know what, I've reached my limit. I'm not going to say anything to them, but I really just don't have the capacity right now. Maybe in the future I will. and that's really helped me not to keep, sane in a sense, and not to be drawn into that story of why I was upset or how that person hurt me, whatever. But it really all began with that thought, and that it's funny how what I loved about Khenpo Rinpoche, I mean, he's probably one of the, I think he's the best master I've personally ever met, that I could apply what he taught me and how it had this ripple effect. So it wasn't just the one time. Over the years, I've developed my own little sort of view of it, and I've worked with it experientially, and I have found it so useful. That's what he was really, I feel like he was really good at giving specific things to specific people because of their personalities. He knew people so well, and I didn't spend as much time as some people with him. I had my interviews and everything, but I found he got you so quickly, and it was very helpful. Pretty much everything he told me that I've utilized, I would say was helpful.
Yeah. I really love that. Have you shared the neutrality quote that he gave you? Why not?
Oh, I think I have in another show. Basically, I was going through a very difficult period, and I felt everyone had let me down, and particularly this one relationship, and I was really angry, he was one of the few people I could be angry around, and he was really cool with it. Like, he never, I don't know, I just could be myself emotionally. I feel very lucky that I always was. I would cry, and whatever was going on with me, and he was saying, like, well, these people that really hurt you, and they really had. It wasn't like a small thing. He said, well, those are the ones that need your compassion the most. I said, well, I can't give it to them. I said, that's just not possible right now. I was in my early 20s or early 30s, and I was very, very emotional. And he says, okay, that's all right. Just how about neutrality? You practice neutrality where you don't wish them any harm, that you just see them as, and I looked at him, I said, yeah, I can do that. So I even made a commitment to him. I said, yeah, I think I can be neutral. I can learn to do that. And even that was immediately kind of calmed me. I felt like he'd heard me. He worked with me with my capacity at the time. But of course, that meant I had to be honest with him too and say, look, I just can't do that. So that was the story. It was a private interview I had. Probably, maybe not. It was close to one of the last ones I ever had in person with him for some reason. But I wrote it down. I wrote a poem about it. more recently, and I have used it through the years with certain situations. I'll say, oh, Krista, let's practice neutrality, So it really stuck with me. It as a very practical, useful, and that's what I like about teachers that work a lot with people. It seems like they figure out what works and what doesn't. Like some of these teachings can seem very idealistic and very difficult to attain.
Right.
So he gave me a step towards an ideal that I thought was really useful and still is.
I really appreciate you sharing this, because I didn't want, for people who have just joined the broadcast and maybe they haven't listened to previous episodes, it was really nice to hear you repeat the story, because it is beautiful. When, as you say, he was a great master, and everybody who met him carried away some really great nugget, or 2 or 3 or 10 nuggets of really good information. And I think that it's really great to share them. And this is, in a way, sort of how I think we're all going to do Sanity right now. We're all going to do Sanity right now by doing our best to be self-possessed, to be within ourselves, to be solid within ourselves, know our values, try our best not to hurt ourselves, and try our best not to hurt others, because that's really the essence of what the Buddha's teachings are. He said, do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. Those are the 3 things that he taught. And then the 4th statement was, this is the teaching of the Buddha. And yes, there's a list of in Buddhist ethics, there's a list of 10 unskillful actions, but there's also a list of 10 skillful actions, which are the opposite. Mm-hmm. And so forth. Yes, we have this source of Buddhist ethics. And then we have great people like the fellow from the 8th century who said, be self-possessed. So I guess I did share the
yes,
kernel,
the kernel, yes,
which is self-possession
and determination.
And also determination. So being able to practice those things, that gives us a foundation. And then being present for other people who may not be where we are, you see, in their own recovery from this painful experience. Everybody's going to be in a different place.
Right.
So we have to recognize they're in a different place. And then if you've got members of your family, like I do, who, supported the other side, you have to kind of what I feel really happy is that my relative, who is very close to me, said, I just want us to be able to be together. And you know what? And to, I said, I'm okay. I'm okay. That's, thank you very much for saying that. And I don't want this to come between us. I want us to just remember that we love each other in spite of our differences. And that's kind of what we were able to decide. But I think it's because he's sort of spiritually, aimed himself, this other member of my family, and again was tired of didn't wanted to kind of tamp down any arguing and so forth. During the election, this relative attempted to convince me that his candidate was right, and I had to say, me, I'm a lifelong member of the other party, and I was a union member, so this is not going to play with me. But thank you so much for expressing your thoughts, and I love you anyway. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I would end the conversation. It's like, I love you anyway. Mm-hmm. One of my husband's friends has a funny saying. I don't know if I like it or not. I don't know. I haven't decided whether I like this saying or not, but it's kind of appealing. He says, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Oh, yeah, that could be creepy even.
That could be creepy. Oh yeah, that could be creepy. But I love the idea that I love, basically, instead of saying that, why doesn't he just say, I love you no matter what?
Right.
I love you no matter what. No matter what, I love you. So maybe that's the same saying, just not creepy.
Well, that's an important conversation too, is our words. And I mean, oh my goodness, words, it's
oh boy.
People use them differently. People don't think sometimes. I've said things that came across and someone was so upset and I didn't mean it at all the way they took it, but it was too late. And afterwards I thought, oh, I could see why they thought that, because they weren't inside my head and I didn't explain it well enough. And so I've certainly had missteps myself. And that's another really important part of cultivating sanity is what we say to each other as well as what we take in.
Yeah. In fact, just this past week at Columbus, Karma Takes Some Choling, the center I'm connected with in Columbus, Ohio, I was asked to speak about this. And so I called it Dharma Talk. You know, Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha, and talk is like what we say and how important it is. And I shared these 5 things that the Buddha said you have to think about before you speak. That's 5. That's too many. But I'll tell you all 5 anyway. It says, before criticizing somebody else, it says, in due season, this is all like fancy old language. In due season will I speak, not out of season. So that means at the right time. In truth, I will speak, not in falsehood, meaning truth. Gently, I will speak, not harshly, you know, because you can tell the truth and tell it harsh. Okay. To their profit will I speak, not to their loss. With kindly intent will I speak, not in anger. And this is really important. This to their profit, I will speak, not to their loss. There's that zero-sum game appearing, right? And Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said, one time he observed a group of people talking and they were arguing with each other. He actually observed this. And then later he said, I said, I'm sorry you had to witness that argument. And he said, you know, he didn't say it in exactly these words. He said, you're going about it all wrong. And I'm like, okay, sure. And he said, you're just trying to overpower one another. And that's never going to work. You're just trying to overpower one another. He said, it's better to find ways to work together. And when you figure that out, these arguments will come to an end. So, and so he was right. It was just brute strength against brute strength. You know, you're right. You're wrong. You're right. You're wrong. You know, all this back and forth, right? You're, oh, I'm sorry. You're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're okay. I had to get the example right. So he would, but see, here's the thing. And I say this in the Dharma talk from last week. The word for arrogance in Tibetan is nga, 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 jal, Gyal, nga, jal. And you know what it means? It means I victorious.
Oh.
So, I mean, right? So, and so when we, and see, that goes to that pure and impure mind, that impure mind and the pure mind is, you know, nga jao, I will beat you. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's like, I'm going to best you. That's it. And you're going to do it my way or the highway, you know? So I feel like, and then see what that does, because the Buddha in his Four Noble Truths said that the cause of suffering was really clinging and fixation. And anything, and the worst thing that we cling to is our sense of self, nga jao, I victorious. And so by clinging to that, we create a world of friends and enemies, or allies and enemies. And then we divide the whole world, and then we try to pit one side against the other, and then we enjoy it. And it's really just not healthy for us in any way. And this is why stepping back and looking for ways to help instead of how to beat somebody. Somebody put some nasty stuff on my Facebook account during the election season. And I just wrote, you know, mean-spiritedness is not a good look for you. It just isn't, it's not attractive. You know, mean-spiritedness, and they didn't say anymore, but that doesn't mean that they were admonished, because they kept going into other people's pages and doing the same thing. And even now, I have a Facebook friend who's trying to pick fights.
Oh, yes.
I guess because they want to keep winning. I'm not 100% sure. And I feel for this, because it really is exciting to win, and you want to keep winning. But when you don't have an enemy to fight, you have to make a new one.
Right.
And then you're on a treadmill. You're on a hamster wheel. You're going around and around and around for that moment of good feeling, like I won. And it's
an interesting thing. I think Michael brought up the idea that he thinks in America, if I get this right, Michael, you can jump in if it's wrong, but basically it's like picking the parties are more like a team, and that we see them as teams, and that, oh, my team is winning. And it's not a very really healthy way to elect your leaders. Because I think the difference with this particular thing, it wasn't about a party, it was about a felon being elected. And some of the people I know that elected him, I still can't get it. I mean, I really can't get it, because they're not idiots. They have good qualities in them. And one of them is part of the minority group that is going to suffer. Yeah. So I really don't understand that part of it. But I can understand if you think it's a team and you're going to win, and that's my team. I've got to, because people get really carried away with that. That makes a little more sense to me, because it becomes all emotional, no sober thinking about, do I really want this kind of person leading the country with the ability to, a nuclear bomb at his fingertips? We know what he's like, but he's worse even. Is he capable? His mental capacity seems to have decreased. I mean, just looking at it more soberly, not like Republican versus Democrat versus independent. This is what's so interesting about American politics. I know it's elsewhere too, but definitely American politics.
Well, you see, and I understand what you're saying, and I think that there, personally, as a former journalist, and knowing what persuasive writing can do, I think that persuasive writing has just proliferated, and people have sought to show themselves to be influencers, and shown themselves to be celebrities, and shown themselves to want to gather people for their team. And I think that the problem is that, what is it Andy Warhol said, in the future, everyone will be world famous for 5 minutes. And I think what happens is that people love that so much, they can't give it up. And again, nga jiao, I victorious. It's like, I am the most important person in the situation. And sometimes the team even gets lost. It's just about, can I win? And I think that this is why it's going to be helpful. Somebody asked me once, a researcher from Rutgers University asked me, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the youth of this country, of America? And I said, it's a feeling of purposelessness. Oh. They don't feel that they have a purpose in life. And so that's why they join gangs or teams. Anyhow, that's why they join gangs. That's why they do crime. And it's because they want to belong and they want purpose. But wouldn't it be great if and then, of course, then the researcher said, well, what's the solution to that? And I said, from my experience as a Catholic school kid, when we were in high school, we were taken to an inner city school and we played with children after school as part of an after school program. And it was small. It was just a small thing to play and help kids with their homework, littler kids, But I felt like I was doing some good. And I said, so the solution is to find a way to expose youth to the suffering of other people and show them how they, even in their youth, can resolve that suffering. Help the people resolve that suffering. And to me, it's magical, and that it's and that it shows people who do this, I think they naturally will have some self-possession and be less likely to try to be encouraged to harm others, because they will have been helpers and seen what that felt like.
We are coming to the end of our show, and I did want to mention your website, lamakathy.net. And Correct. It's up on our website, too. You could look for her on Facebook, too, under Kathy Wesley, Wesley, and on YouTube as well. I encourage you to listen to some of her teachings. And There's a whole lot you can find out about going to her website about Lama Kathy. And so thank you so much for being patient and coming on the show.
I tell you what, I love talking about ways that people can help each other. I just do, like just keep finding the good within yourself. Never stop, because the Buddha said we are all capable of being Buddha. So just keep going.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thank you all for listening in. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Stay sane.
Om Mani Padme Hum.